Welcome back, Star Wars fans, to another episode of Coruscant Radio Underground. It's been a while since we did YouTube. I guess we
It's
did
been a
some.
minute, yeah.
I guess we did some Book of Boba Fett stuff for Coruscant Radio
Yeah,
Underground, and
yeah.
so hopefully people will figure out that Coruscant Radio Underground exists on this YouTube
It
channel
does.
as well. That all the science fictionary stuff falls under the science, under this banner, and it's all here. And
we're the same people.
same people. It's
Yeah.
weird. Some people don't know
If there is
that.
people, it's kind of funny. It was like the same way it always threw me whenever I would meet people, like once we were married and be like, oh, wait, that's your sister? It was like, well, duh, that's my sister. Like, how did you not know that? I feel the same way when people are like, oh, that's your podcast? It's like, well, yeah. I mean, it makes sense that people miss the memo, but
I mean,
it just seems so obvious to me that
well,
we're the
no,
same
I mean,
people.
I assume that people that don't realize that Coruscant Radio Underground and Science Fictionary podcast are the same people, just haven't listened.
Yeah,
Um,
it's true.
so
Makes sense.
not a lot of Mississippi accents in the Red 5 network.
It's true.
Just the one.
Just the one.
um,
I don't know. Like David and I are from Louisiana, but still kind of southern.
That's true.
But yours is a little more distinctly Mississippi though than ours, I think.
But we're going to talk about Kenobi episodes 4 and 5 tonight.
Mhm.
We did 1, 2, and 3. We were just coming off Star Wars Celebration. We were coming off Marisha coming back from working a job. There was a lot going on, and we just weren't able to pull off the whole YouTube thing for that one.
Yeah, David went and got a life, got a girlfriend, going on work trips.
That was the upside, though, is that David actually recorded with us because we did it on the podcast. We recorded in what was normally one of our science fictionary slots.
Right, that's true.
And David was able to record with us. So you don't often get to hear David talk about Star Wars with us. So
yeah, it's always fun.
Yeah, it's different. He's got a very different view on it than me because he's he's kind of like you, but even more to an extreme of like you saw the originals first, but the prequels were really where you fell in love with it.
Right.
But the prequels were the first thing he probably ever remembered of Star Wars.
Yeah, probably.
Because they were all out by the time they were. Well, no, he was born before they were all out.
Yeah, probably. But he would have been really young when they were coming
But he
out.
wouldn't have remembered. But like they were relatively new when he was a kid.
Like the Clone Wars would have been on when he was a kid.
So those are available on the podcast. It's one episode. We did all 3 episodes at once because the first 2 dropped while I was in Anaheim
and I was working.
And you were working, so we didn't get to record. So we did do an episode there. Sorry, there wasn't a YouTube episode, but we're going to do episode 4 and 5 tonight.
Yes.
We were supposed to do, oddly enough, we were supposed to do those separately too. And everybody in the house has taken turns being sick this week.
So fun. Having kids is the best.
Well, it's like I jinxed it the other night. I said, all right, kids, because if you've ever listened to our show, you know we do the Padawan report, which we haven't done in a while, where the kids really want to do it. We're kind of trying to get it going again, which is where we talk about all these things that we love with our kids.
The cousins were here.
And I was like, okay,
it's going to be a thing.
This week we're going to do new episodes of the Padawan report for Obi-Wan and Miss Marvel. And people started dropping like flies, like sore throats and everything.
And then
people couldn't talk.
They would get to and then the first one who you thought was already well would start off sick again.
Yeah. So it's been a lot of fun. I mean, I've even been sick because I was going to record some stuff on my own and I haven't been well enough to do it.
But here we are.
But we're back. And I'm going to open this drink. It's probably going to be noisy. It wasn't that bad. So let's just kind of start off with just kind of general thoughts of, at this point, 5 episodes in, we got 1 episode left. Rumors floating around right now is it's going to be about an hour and a half long, which is amazing.
Yeah.
I'm all kinds of down for that. I wish more of these limited series shows would shoot for a big
movie length
kind of
finale.
feature length finale. And I mean, an hour and a half, we don't really consider an hour and a half feature length anymore, hardly, because
yeah, but I mean, some of your greatest movies are
right. Well, all the ones we grew up with in the 80s and 90s were 90 to 100 minutes.
Right.
It was weird when they went longer than that.
Yeah. Like I remember as a kid, like the movie is an hour and a half long. It's just kind of like, my rule I had in my head.
Right. So, but just kind of taking, I mean, so far, just to kind of refresh for those, if just because there might be some people that watch us on YouTube that don't actually listen to the podcast. So really at this point, first 5 episodes, one left to go. What do you think about the series?
I love it so much. I mean, it's not perfect.
No, it's not.
But honestly,
how many shows are?
Okay, for that matter, how much Star Wars has been just perfect? And how many even more? How many Star Wars
episodes 4 and 5?
And how many Star Wars have people thought were just perfect when they came out? So episode 4, you look back at, there's some little like continuity things that never would have happened if they had known it was going to be such a phenomenon.
Right. I mean, if you look at it based sheerly on initial reactions to the movie, there's 2 perfect Star Wars movies, and that's Rogue One and Episode 4.
Yeah.
Episode 5, people just kind of freaked out about the twist.
Right.
It wasn't that it wasn't loved. I mean, almost since it came out, has been considered the most perfect of the movies.
Right.
But it was the first one to get, it got a little bit of, but everybody tries to compare the flack that one got to flack that The Last Jedi got. That's not even.
But there's but historically, for everything except episode 1, which was, kind of not episode 1, episode 4, which was the inaugural movie, there's always been some kind of pushback initially, because it's always like, well, how does this fit in with everything before, right? That's always been, right. Like the Star Wars question. Like, well, how does this jibe with all the things we already thought we knew about the Force, about whatever? Right. So all that to say, I don't think that the Obi-Wan Kenobi has been a absolutely perfect show, but I have really enjoyed it. The story has been there. The dialogue has been good. And Ewan McGregor is as awesome as I always knew he would be.
Yeah. No, I mean, I know there's some complaining about the acting. I feel like his last name's Ingram, right? That's playing
Moses
Reva.
Ingram.
Moses Ingram.
Yeah.
She really stepped it up. I felt like she took a little while to find her character. I felt like in episodes 1 and 2, it was like, if she's going to be this intense for the whole thing and they don't tell us why, like that was part of the problem. It was like, okay, she's really, really intense. She's really, really pissed off, but we don't know why. Like, it's hard to kind of accept a character that's just that ramped up and you don't have an explanation yet. So going 2 episodes without telling us why she was that way. But I felt like by the 3rd episode that she really hit a stride with the character. I felt like she really found the character. I'm really enjoying the performance. I don't necessarily love the character. I don't have this great desire, like, oh, I've got to see this character redeemed. But when I say I don't love the character, I like the character as a bad guy. Like, I really love the character. I'm not going, I know there's some people who's like, oh, she's got to be redeemed. It's like, one, we do that sometimes too much in Star Wars. I get it. It's fairy tale. Redemption stories are sort of emblematic of the genre. Like, they're just kind of part of it.
And
like,
it's sort of the Star Wars, like when they
decided, is the Star Wars trope.
When they decided to redeem Darth Vader, it became the Star Wars trope.
Right. And I think redemption is a great, it's okay. So first of all, I'm going way off the notes here. I don't know why I bothered making them. But Star Wars is inherently a religious film. I know some people will freak out at hearing that, but it's true. George Lucas wrote it. He didn't write it to be Christian. He didn't write it to be Buddhist. It's kind of a combination of the two and a few other things thrown in for good measure. But
it was inherently, it
was a spiritual
story.
He has said that he created it to make young people interested in spiritual things. So I think that the fact that we play with this idea of redemption, which is an inherently religious trope, in Star Wars, I think it makes perfect sense that we keep coming back to that when we're dividing things in this fairy tale light of good versus evil. This is an episode I'm really looking forward to doing, the kind of gray area episode that
Mhm.
we're working on. But um, Star Wars at its core is a light versus dark, good versus evil fairy tale.
Right.
And it doesn't mean we can't do great characters and we can't have good ones, because we do have a few. But often they're faced with a choice of the light or the dark. These
Mhm.
characters that sit in the middle, they can't stay there forever. They're eventually, given this choice. And it's
Mhm.
like, once I make this choice,
Right.
I'm committed to that.
This is the point of no return. And like
Right.
sometimes there's another point,
And
like, okay, because actually that wasn't the point. Maybe this is another point of no return.
right. But that's this thing where when you're dealing with things that are hard one way, hard the other way, with right and wrong, good versus evil, you have to leave characters on the path of evil, a way to come back.
Mhm.
Just like you can't, it's just like, this is kind of the thing. Like, you can have characters that are walking the path of the good. We do this really well in Star Wars too, because everybody talks about there's all these redemption arcs. We have good characters that fall away.
Mhm.
It's not just about redemption. There's a lot of falling away in Star Wars.
Mhm. I mean, Anakin Skywalker is your
Anakin is
classic
right. Well,
example.
Anakin's both. Anakin is
Mhm.
Star Wars. The first 6 movies is the rise and fall of, and then the redemption of Anakin Skywalker.
Mhm.
Um, so I really don't mind that we do that this much, but like, there's nothing about this character right now that just makes me. She has to be redeemed.
Mhm.
And if they do it, what I'm saying is, if they do it, it works. It's no
Mhm.
reason to get upset about it. Um, I
But if they don't, it also honestly, I would kind of like to see it go sort of the direction they went with Maul, where
Maul is one
he
of the most
has
incredibly interesting characters in Star Wars.
his moment, like where he finds his peace as he's dying.
Yeah,
Like he doesn't reject the dark. He doesn't have it in him to reject. He's got too much invested in darkness to reject it.
was the
But
constant craving for power.
there is in that last little second, there's that he looks at Obi-Wan, he's like, is that child the chosen one? Is there, he doesn't want he feels like he's lost, but he doesn't want the whole galaxy to follow this trajectory.
Right. Well, he not only is he lost, but he understands that he wasn't fully in control of putting himself on this course. Like, he's
Right.
what he was created to be, and um
And he
and
has too much invested to turn his back on it now.
right, and he's such a tortured character. Like I said,
Mhm.
he's one of the most incredible. I know some people really don't like that they brought him back because he was chopped in half and it cheapens the death and
I
all
mean,
that. And they're not wrong,
no.
but when you can take that and bring the character back and do what
Mhm.
Dave Filoni did and make him one of the most interesting villains we've ever had.
Mhm.
Um,
And I really love hearing Dave Filoni talking to George Lucas about it. He's like, "I was thinking, what would you think about bringing Maul back?" He was like, "I don't think that's a good idea, dude." Basically.
right.
And then, they kind of did this, George Lucas really made it work. Even like I remember reading like on the internet, they're like, "Oh, Darth Maul," and they're like in the cartoons, and I was like, "No, I reject it." I
Yeah.
wasn't having any of like that's ridiculous. Then I went and watched it. I was like, okay, it kind of works. It kind of. So I wouldn't hate to see Riva kind of have a little bit more of that trajectory where she doesn't reject the dark, but we also see she's not totally
Not restored.
not restored, but she's also got some investment in the whole galaxy not being as tortured as she is.
Right. Well, I think they're mirroring, and we'll get into this because we're really kind of doing overall thoughts on the show right now. But I think they're doing a lot of mirroring of Jedi Fallen Order, which unfortunately makes me feel like even less. I always had a little hope that Cal Kestis could show up in this because I
Mhm.
really think they should do that. I think that he needs to show up in something
Mhm.
instead in this era. I understand not having another Jedi just show up in this one,
Mhm.
but you're also really doing a lot of similar things in your story. And
Mhm.
so I can understand like pulling him in just shines a really bright light on the parallels.
And they
But
also have some fun kind of parallels going on with Force Unleashed.
right. But where we're going to leave off, and we'll get more into this, but with Reva finding out that there's children that need to be protected from presumably Vader,
Mhm.
um,
Vader or the Emperor or
or the
somebody.
Emperor, or yeah, there's children that they don't want them to know about.
Mhm.
So, the assumption is going to be, Force users
Mhm.
that he's trying to protect. There's nothing in there that gives away that they're Anakin's children.
Yeah, no, I don't think that there's any indication other than they're children, they're on Tatooine, and Owen Lars is involved.
Yeah.
So,
So
but now she realizes, and here's why I think she's got to die dead, because she knows that there's a connection between Bail Organa and his child, and Owen Lars and another child on Tatooine, and they're all connected to Ben Kenobi.
yeah,
Like, she knows way too many pieces of this puzzle that nobody knows until we get well into the original trilogy. So I think that I don't think there's any way she makes it out of
no, and
this.
I don't think she needs to. We've got stories set immediately after this. We never have her. She's the third sister.
Mhm.
She never shows up in anything else
Mhm.
with as far as the Inquisitors go. I'm not convinced there's any. We know the Inquisitors don't last up until
The original series.
the original movies. So
Yeah.
I don't think there's any reason to necessarily have this character stick around.
Mhm.
So I think odds are she dies in this next one. I mean, we don't really know because we're going to get in just if I haven't said too much yet, but we are fully talking spoilers here.
100% spoilers.
So if you haven't watched both of these episodes, then turn back now because we will be talking spoilers. We don't know that she or hasn't already been dealt a death blow.
Yeah.
Like she's we're gonna have a conversation here about people surviving lightsaber wounds, but this isn't new,
I mean, we did just bring up the chopped in half guy.
right?
I mean, if he gets to come back from being literally cut in two with his dark force evil,
Yeah,
I mean, like, it's really hard to complain too much. And the thing is, it's not like Kathleen Kennedy made that call. George Lucas did that, you
right.
know.
Um, but I mean, having a character get stabbed and survive is nothing new. I guess it's all about where you get stabbed, but
Mhm.
I get the impression that Vader has intentionally maimed this character. That
Mhm.
it's going to be more torture for him to abandon her now
Mhm.
um, than to kill her dead.
And I think we kind of
Killing
get
her
the
would almost be a mercy.
and I think that's kind of we get the impression that he stabbed her in the temple as a child.
Mhm.
Because you have that same you get the idea that he's like just repeating this
Yeah,
exact same thing that's already happened to her.
right. And he's been using her, but I feel like Vader, Vader, we already know Vader doesn't like the Inquisitors.
Yeah.
They're sort of a threat to him.
Mhm.
Um, that and we go in the comics and we find out that the Inquisitors were created as a group parallel to Vader, and they don't even know about each other initially,
Right.
until Vader is sent to train them. So they don't like each other. They're not partners in this. They're
Yeah.
both tools used by the same person.
I mean, that's kind of his classic go-to move, right? It's pit people against each other.
Yeah,
and
for sure.
see who comes out stronger.
But overall, I'm really enjoying the show. Like we said, it does have its issues. Um, and a lot of my issues are actually continuity issues, but not continuity within the overarching story.
Not canon
Not
continuity.
canon continuity, just continuity within this story itself. And not like the story works, but like I feel like whoever was in charge of making sure that people were coming from the right place just wandered off set or something.
Yeah, I'm kind of inclined to think, like, having spent a little bit of time on movie sets, I'm kind of inclined to think that it's not the script supervisor as much as somebody was like, "Oh, we don't care. We want this to happen."
I think that's probably true, but do you think it's also possible that things got shaved that would have helped with?
I think that's honestly the most likely scenario, because even in little projects, they're like, "Oh no, there was somebody in a blue shirt there. Get somebody in a blue shirt in
Well,
that spot because we saw their reflection in a window in this
Yeah.
last scene."
Well, the three really glaring things, when Leia is in the tunnel running towards the airbase, and Riva finds out she's in the tunnel, and then Riva appears at the other end. Now, it's perfectly acceptable that Riva realizes where the tunnel's going and just cuts her off.
Mhm.
That's not a big stretch, but we don't show any bit of it to
Mhm.
understand how it happened.
Right. No
We just
context.
have to accept that somehow she got there and got
Somehow.
ahead of, yeah, somehow. The other was when Leia falls from the roof
Right.
and Ben
Stop.
catches her,
Yeah.
sets her down, and then he just walks around the corner at the
It's
end of
like, I'm watching it and I'm like,
and
that
it's like, presumably we're to accept Ben, he's not really using the Force yet, like
Right.
very minimally. He probably went down
found him a ladder
a
and went
ladder over there, but like
way too fast. Like literally, she
It's too
hits the
quick.
ground and then she looks up and he's coming around the
well,
corner. It's like,
we have two offsetting things with time there, where Riva takes like 10 minutes to run from the building where she saw them fighting to where they're at.
literally my least favorite thing about this entire show.
No, it's
so far.
terrible. The part which we're specifically talking about, the parkour scene on the roof in what, episode 2?
Yeah, and she's doing this like leaping across and flips, and it's just
It's not just that she's using the Force.
No.
And look, we do that kind of stuff like Jedi Fallen Order. We do all the climbing on things and running. Show that stuff. That's awesome. But
it looks like a video game though.
But it doesn't, but it, like in the video game, there's a purpose to why you like run along a wall or jump off of a thing. It's to get from point A to point B, which ironically is what parkour actually is creative ways of getting from point A to point B. But she's literally doing parkour. Like she's just doing kick flips off the wall for no good reason. There's no reason for her to do about half the things she does. And we keep cutting back.
And it's time consuming. And it's like unnecessary, and it just keeps going and go. It's like the Energizer Bunny of bad scenes.
Yeah, no, it's just a bad.
And honestly, I feel like the series, if that episode had been the highlight of the series, it would have been like, that's a drag. But
thing is, that episode's got a lot of really fun stuff in it.
But this series has been so good overall. I feel like that is like really kind of
I'm not gonna
drags the
I feel like that's a bad scene, but I'm not gonna call that a nitpick. It doesn't affect the story. It's terrible, but it doesn't damage the plot.
It's true.
The third of the mystery things is actually the biggest one.
Mhm.
Is how Reva's lightsaber at the end of this fight with Vader is just miraculously back in one piece.
Okay, like now I feel like I need to go watch all the episodes of Rebels where the Inquisitors are there to see, like, do their lightsabers just like magically zing back together? I mean, maybe that's a thing and I just don't remember it.
But when they're
like
fighting,
magnetic or
but when
something?
they're fighting with them, the circular part appears to be even ripped off of it.
Does it?
Yeah, or part of it's sticking out, but it's like this, whatever it is, whether the saber was broken in half or just separated, it's magically back together when Reva picks it up after everybody leaves.
It's like that's either a really bad oversight on the part of the props people and the continuity people.
Well, no,
and
it's a
the
bad
director.
oversight one way or the other, because if it somehow was put back together, even if it was some sort of like, oh, it's got really good magnets in it. Whatever it was, they should have, if they wanted us to accept that it was somehow put back together, they should have showed us.
Yeah.
Like some things you do.
And there's no reason why it needs to be together. Like it could be in two pieces and it would not affect that scene at all.
No, I just feel like
Nothing.
it was a mistake. I feel like they shot that
Mhm.
scene out of sequence,
Mhm.
and they changed some things as they went in one scene and forgot to come back and fix it in another.
It's Star Wars. Like it's Star Wars. I mean, they shoot stuff out of sequence all the time but like it's Star Wars.
Shooting
You
out of
have to fix it.
Yeah.
You have to fix it. It's Star Wars. You have to fix it. And they didn't. So they should have.
No, 100%. So anyway, that kind of gets me past my biggest gripes, except for Fortress Inquisitorius, which
that wasn't the fault of that's
that predates this show. That's actually I don't know where that first pops up. It might be Jedi Fallen Order.
I bet it's from a comic book.
Maybe
Dollars to Donuts is from a comic book.
It might be, but they definitely call it that in Jedi Fallen Order too. Yeah. In fact, the Inquisitors as a group are the Inquisitorius. So
Andrew's like it sounds
like something from Harry Potter. It just does. Like 100% sounds like something from Harry Potter. But whatever, I'll get used to it.
It's very Latin. Fortress Inquisitorius. It's like you're
I don't know. Like part of me is like, I wanted to have a cooler name, but then I'm like, well, Vader's Castle. We just call it Vader's Castle. So I don't know. Maybe a cool name is asking too much, but and maybe some people like Fortress Inquisitorius.
I mean, it could be. It's not that it's a bad name. It's just a very Latin name.
Yeah,
it is. It's very specific. It's like if they called it, if they find a peaceful planet and it's like, Shalom. It's like it kind of pulls you out of it a little bit. It's like that's weird.
Now look, I will admit that sometimes when George Lucas named things, he was real on the nose with things.
Like Savage Press. I remember like I know it was a kid's show, but I'm watching I'm like, oh no.
Yeah.
No. It's way too on the nose.
So yeah, I mean, it's not like things like that are new to Star Wars, and it doesn't ruin the story. That's the thing. I have complaints about this show, but I think to be fair, there are very few shows that you can watch that you're not going to have some like at least nitpicks about.
Yeah. It's not perfect in my mind.
It's not perfect, but
it's really good.
As far as like Star Wars stuff goes, like I really, really love Star Wars, and I really, really love the story. I've waited a long time to see an Obi-Wan story that we've been teased with forever. And I'm having a blast with it. I think it's really good. I don't think I know there are people that disagree. I don't think there's any major places where it steps on canon. There are some minor places where it does tweak what we thought we knew a little bit.
Retconny sometimes.
Not new to Star Wars.
Not new to Star Wars. Like we started being retconny from the word go.
So I'm really, really enjoying this show overall.
Yeah, me too. It's
so let's kind of get into just a few points on episode 4. One, this is where we first really see I guess before we even do this, I guess we really start off in the Bacta tank.
I really loved the contrast they had going there.
Yeah, the cuts.
The cuts. And I think it's a really clear picture that Vader and Obi-Wan are tied together.
They're not just tied together. I don't know if there's some like while they're in that state, if there's a connection, or if there's some things that happen later in episode 5 with the reviewing things through the fight. And then realizing at some point that, yes, we're viewing things through the fight. And for most of the episode, we're viewing it through Obi-Wan's remembering. But then we kind of appear to remember the end, how it ends with Kenobi coming out on top from Vader's perspective. And it's like they're tortured by the same things.
And they're, you know, Obi-Wan tells Anakin, you are my brother. And I think this is a place where we see really clearly that they have, you know, they say what, it's one of those things where you see clearly that they have a connection where their brotherhood isn't something that you can just be like, I hate you and now it's gone.
Right.
It's like the degree to which they were dedicated and loyal and loved each other is really, it's compounded the tragedy of how much Vader hates Obi-Wan now, and how betrayed Obi-Wan feel. Like, you really see the tragedy and the fact that even all these years later, they can't escape each other.
Yeah. And their connection, interestingly, is not like other masters and Padawans, because Obi-Wan takes him as a Padawan so young, before he should be taking a Padawan,
and Anakin is too old to start. So
they wind up really being more like brothers than the typical more father and son or father and daughter dynamic.
Yeah. Which is ironically the same dynamic that Anakin has going with Ahsoka later on. You know, it's because he's so young, and she, you know, just because of the weird dynamics that the war brings out, they have more of that sibling dynamic than the parent and child dynamic.
Right. But kind of, I love the cuts. The stuff in the tank is great. The stuff they've done with, man, Vader looks rough.
Yeah. Like whatever they're doing, the makeup, the CGI, all of the things that they're doing on that, the prosthetics, I mean, they're killing it.
Yeah.
I mean, he looks really, really convincing.
So we get a lot of other stuff in this episode that we kind of knew we were getting, we've been seeing Obi-Wan through the series, and this was kind of a given that we were going to see him slowly regain his connection with the Force. We kind of see him while they're on the ship in this one, where he's kind of messing with some stuff, just kind of moving little things with the Force, and he's still struggling with it a lot at this point.
Yeah.
But we see them. So
yeah, you never saw like Obi-Wan doing like a real strain him real hard, you know.
You're right.
Or at least rarely.
But this stuff, and I think it comes back. I think you could argue that it comes back too quickly. In this, it comes back like he really goes from I can barely move anything with the Force to like doing some fairly impressive things in this, but I wouldn't argue that. I would argue that it's this thing. It's like, I have to do this or everybody dies.
And also, I don't think it's like a muscle that you quit using. I think it's like, you know, like you sit down at an instrument. If anybody's got any experience musically, you sit down at an instrument and you pull out a song you haven't played in 15 years. And the first time you play it through, it's like, that's rough. I don't even say, but that muscle memory and that all the ways that it all fits together, it picks back up really quickly. It's not like you have to completely retrain all of this. You just remind your body, this is this thing we do. And it's like, oh, that's right. And you just slip back into it. It's like riding a bike.
Right. Well, and I think that's where we go here, though. But we go into this life and death moment which is where that's why you train. Like, whether you be an athlete or a soldier or whatever, you train and you train and you train and you train so that when you're in that situation, it becomes automatic.
And the thing is, he wasn't just a middling.
No, he's like
was
the
one
Jedi.
he was the, and you see in this fight scene that we have in the beginning of episode 5, whenever you see Anakin and Obi-Wan they're just going at it, and they are masterful. Great job, by the way, with the choreography. Like, clearly Ewan McGregor and Hayden Christensen put real time and commitment into that fight scene because it looks perfect.
Yeah, I did a good job.
It is so good. But that's the thing. Like, Obi-Wan he's not just like, he's a master at this.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I mean, so what? The world-class violinist, gets his feelings hurt and puts down his violin for 10 years and picks it up again. It's not like it's not still there. Yeah. It's all still there. You just have to find it.
Right.
And I think it's very believable that he just, and like you said, whenever push comes to shove and he's desperate, it's instinct. It's there. It's all there.
Right.
Years, decades of ingrained instinct training. And we see a lot that if you read like some of the books and things, like Qui-Gon was really big on drilling basics. Like, we do the things till you don't think about them till they're automatic.
Yeah. So just kind of taking episode 4 by itself, what were some things that you really, really liked in the episode? We'll start there.
So the scene where okay, so I really liked whenever they would have a little breathy thing.
The rebreather underwater was a great callback. Yes. It's not just, it's a callback there, but it's also how Cal gets into the fortress in Jedi Fallen Order.
Okay. But as soon as I was like, oh, it's the things from episode 1. So, but he gets in there, and the scene with all these Jedi entombed in this amber, I mean, it was compelling.
I think lore-wise, like, just as far as entries into the overall Star Wars lore, that's the moment in this episode.
It's not one of those things like, wow, that was so fun, but it was really compelling because it's like
creepy
as all get out, and just like a reminder that, like, this is what he's up against, is people who do this to people like him.
Yeah. I mean, even the stormtroopers are remarking on how creepy the fortress is. And I mean, essentially it's like, I mean, this is the beginnings of the recreation of a Sith temple, right? In some ways. I mean, they're not Sith, the Inquisitors aren't, but only because of the rule of 2.
Right.
But they're still dark side force users.
I mean,
I think that whole thing
around that little rule there.
Right.
They're totally just
so
loophole in that all the bits.
Well, they are. And I think the real answer there is Sith Lords. There's 2 Sith Lords. There's 2 rulers.
Yeah.
There's the top guy and then his underling. And then everybody else it's a pyramid underneath them. And it goes down to the Inquisitors and then to the Purge Troopers, which we actually got to see in this episode. We didn't really get to see Purge Troopers really in action. We see the one that's shooting at Kenobi through the little crack in the door.
Doesn't go well.
No, that ends up not going well. But it's fun to see. So I'm replaying Jedi Fallen Order. But I really love that game, but they took so many cues from that game for what the inside of this fortress should look and feel like. But let's talk about the tomb for a minute. Because I think that's one of the biggest things to talk about in this episode. What do you think's going on with the tomb?
I mean, honestly, essentially, before he said it's a tomb, I assumed that they were in some kind of stasis, that they were, I assumed that they weren't dead. I assumed that they were in some kind of suspended animation so that they could be experimented on.
Yeah, so I think that they're encased in something to preserve them. And I don't know if this is part of Palpatine's um well, he's been experimenting for a long time with creating force users or cloning force users, and so you've got a lot of genetic material from force users there. It's either that or the possibility even that there's some sort of power to be drawn from the midichlorians.
Well, and that was kind of the other thing. The other thought was that maybe they were creating some kind of, like, I assume that they were just siphoning off their power, which I would assume wouldn't be possible if they were dead. But we do see, like, that Luminara's body is putting off some kind of beacon, right?
They're using it as a trap. Yeah,
they're using it as a trap. So, I mean, it kind of tracks that there's. Well, okay, so here's actually the other thing. They don't disappear.
Well, okay, so the only Jedi that we've really had disappear were ones whose connections were strong enough with the living force, which really that's a thing that starts with Qui-Gon.
Yeah, and I guess he doesn't disappear either. They burned him.
Right, but he finds the way to come back. And then when we see characters like Obi-Wan and Yoda and a lot of our subsequent Jedi that all kind of come from the Qui-Gon school of how to be a Jedi, that their bodies become one with the body just disappears. So yeah, that's a thing that happens later.
Okay.
So,
but I guess it would make sense that, because I think we see in Clone Wars when they're faking somebody other's death, faking Obi-Wan's death, right? They actually entomb him and they have like a light, kind of go off, like some kind of. So presumably there is still some sort of latent power. There is some sort of power in the actual physical. I mean, I guess if the midichlorians
the standard
are physical
up to Qui-Gon, at least with the ones we see, I mean, the standard for Jedi appears to be a funeral pyre. They usually burn the body.
Why?
Right. I mean, is there some lingering connection to the Force with that body that's severed at that, when the body's burned? Or is it just a religious thing? Like, there's a lot of things there they haven't told us, but it does leave the door open for quite a few things to be possible with these bodies. As far as
none of them nice.
No, they're all creepy. As far as what they're encased in, I do kind of have a theory. Because they appear to be, I've heard a lot of people say it looks like amber. I think I think it obviously reminds everybody of amber because it's a callback to the original Jurassic Park.
Right.
With the mosquito encased in the amber. But that's what it looks like. Well, in Jedi Fallen Order, we know that the Empire is harvesting sap from the Roshir trees to create some powerful chemical, but we don't know
on Kashyyyk, right?
On Kashyyyk. But they don't tell us. They tell us that they're using it to create some powerful compound,
but we don't know what.
But they never tell us what.
I mean, that seems like the most likely connection.
So I think they're encasing force users in something made from the tree sap of the Roshir tree.
And honestly, it almost looks like some of them. It looks like,
because Kashyyyk is so unspoiled and pure and full of life that it's very strong with the Force. And these trees are ancient.
Yeah.
So there's a strong connection to the Force the living force with these trees. So I really think what they're encased in is whatever's being created from the Rocher trees.
Yeah. I think that seems like a sound theory.
But I want to know more, like, and I really don't want to explore it in a comic book because, frankly, I can't read all the comic. I don't care to read all the comic books. I've tried, like, I like comic books just fine, but comic books are not my favorite
Medium.
medium to read.
Yeah.
What else? What else did you like about this episode? There's one thing that I heard a lot of complaints about, and I want to see what you thought about it. There's the how Tala just basically walks through security. She basically walks in, levels some threats, walks through, and a lot of people are upset that, well, that's not the way military protocol works.
In a fictional
And
fairy tale space universe.
I'm kind of like, yeah, I think it was I think it was on Screen Crush that I heard a good point made, that this the security of the empire is not necessarily founded in good
Sound
sound military tactics as much as it's just about fear and leveling enough of a threat at someone that's ranked beneath you may just be enough to make somebody go, I don't want any
People who
part
are
of
making
that.
this complaint haven't watched nearly enough Leverage. They don't understand that if you just go with enough confidence, you can get in anywhere. These are the things that Leverage teaches one.
I frankly don't care if the Empire's security protocols mirror real world military protocols.
No, it doesn't bother me. And the thing is, she's not.
Well, every Star Wars movie has done the same thing.
Also,
Han and Luke walk right in the front door of the Death Star.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. He just walks out of the shuttle, taps on his helmet.
There he goes. I mean, the thing is, she's got solid credentials. She is an Imperial officer, was an Imperial officer before any of this went down. She was an Imperial officer before she was involved in the rebellion. I mean, and also it is an Imperial facility, but it's like if the Empire is running some like creepy dark Vatican, it's not, it's not like regular military protocols are in place here. It's like this weird quasi-religious, and the people at the top of this totem pole are not your commanding officer. It's these scary people who are running around with lightsabers and could just, I mean, that's a compelling reason to break military protocol.
Well, no, Vader's and Palpatine's protocol is like, we do what I say. Like, period. It's not.
I mean, and yes, I think
about
for
following rules.
I think for your regular, everyday run-of-the-mill Imperial officer, they probably live most of their life by Imperial protocol. But whenever you're in the stronghold of these Force users, I'd be like,
yeah,
don't care.
I mean, does she walk in? Does Tala walk in too easily? Maybe. I don't care. It doesn't bother me.
No, it doesn't bother me.
So other things, I'm going to kind of pick up the pace here a little bit, or we're going to be here all night. So the other big things, well, the one thing to mention is that Ben Kenobi is definitely the galactic hide and go seek champion, right? Like, he's really, really good at being sneaky.
Yeah.
Like, he just sneaks wherever he wants to go. And that's like one of the biggest things we know about Kenobi across the film franchise.
He can sneak in all kinds of places he's not supposed to be.
I mean, first time we see Obi-Wan Kenobi in the prequels, he's sneaking somewhere.
Yeah. Do we ever see him like in any installment of Star Wars where he's not sneaking into something?
I think that was always intentionally set aside as the difference between intentionally to show the difference in the two characters of how Obi-Wan and Anakin approach
Anakin
things.
was just like, boom, thermal detonators. And
because Anakin will literally just walk in the front door and throw down.
And be like, I'm cooler than you are. You're dead.
Right.
And where, Obi-Wan's, he's all about subtlety.
Right. Well, Obi-Wan would rather you just not ever know he was there.
Yeah, but unfortunately, he's always with Anakin, so somebody always finds out.
The other thing, so the other big thing in this episode that we should talk about before we move on to the other, so that we don't do a 3-hour episode here. I'm trying not to do a 2-hour episode, but we're pushing our luck. So Leia being
So
tortured.
cute.
So Leia's being questioned. She's driving Reva nuts because she keeps playing word games with, well, oh, if we're all on the same side, then surely I can like tell my dad about this before we do it.
Okay, and anybody who's like, oh, a 10-year-old doesn't have the maturity to. You've never argued with a child. No, you've never.
They're smarter than you
they're
give them
smarter than you
credit
think.
for.
And they're like, oh, really? Well, I hear your story and I raise you.
Leia's more well spoken than most 10-year-olds you would probably argue.
She is, but how much time have you ever spent with a kid that reads a lot? Like
plenty.
No, this is a hypothetical question
for our
audience members. Here. No, like I regularly hear my kids, my nieces and nephews, and they'll say things, and I'm like, particularly the little one, the 4-year-old who's got all the older siblings that read a lot,
who's just absorbed all that
and absorbs it all, and I'm like,
yeah, no, she doesn't. Stuff? Right? Yeah, she doesn't.
I could totally see a 10-year-old Arya being that little person.
Yeah,
and because she thinks that she is the queen of the world, and she knows how to argue, and she's unflappable because she has been so safe her entire life. She thinks she's invincible.
So what do you think? And that's you've really kind of already answered my question, but like as far as Leia, really not intimidated by Reva.
No.
And I think so personally, I think some of that's that she's naive.
Absolutely.
That she thinks because she, Reva threatens her and she says, I am a princess of Alderaan.
My father's a senator.
Right.
How dare you?
Right. So she still feels like she's somehow like got a leg up on Reva here, that she's safe. Nobody possibly would actually do anything bad to her.
I mean, even the people who kidnapped her, they're like, we're going to do bad things to you. And they just like put her in a cell and they didn't do anything bad to her,
Right.
Like the thing is, and having children in my house, one day I looked at Andrew and I was like, hon, I think we've protected our kids too much. Like they don't realize that like things are dangerous because like they climb up on a high thing and they're like, catch me, and they jump. And what always happens? Somebody catches them. Like they haven't learned.
I mean, we have had a couple of broken arms, but
yeah, but in general, like they sometimes do really dumb stuff and they're just completely unintimidated by terrible things that could happen. Like I'm an adult, I understand terrible things that can happen in this world. I've been around, I've had less than great things happen in my life. My kids,
I mean, I think that's probably fairly normal for kids in a stable situation.
And that's the thing. She's spoiled. She's smart. Her
daddy will send a military to an army to bring her back.
Mm-hmm.
At least, that's what she tells them initially.
Yeah, exactly. Like she's
before her dad sends this one man.
Right. What do you mean? Where's the rest of the army? I mean, like I said, I'm watching this child and I see my 4-year-old niece and I'm like, yep, yeah. I buy it.
But I think the real telling thing is like, she's not scared of Reva right up until they put her in that torture device.
Yeah. And then she's shit.
And then the little kid comes out.
Mm-hmm. All of a sudden it's like, oh, maybe
all poise is gone.
I don't have this under control after all.
Yeah. So I mean, but what you're telling me, you're fine with the way they've portrayed her through that.
I buy it.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel the same way. I think the actress that is playing Leia has done a phenomenal job. Now, this isn't her first. I mean, she's got a dozen or so acting credits to her name already. But She's doing a really great job. I
Yeah.
fully expect to see her in a lot more stuff.
Like I said, I've known that child. I buy
Right.
it.
So let's move on to episode 5. This one, there's not a, I mean, there's some big story moments that happen here, but essentially you have the fight
Hmm.
that we start off with, that we see a flashback to Obi-Wan and Anakin
Which is so
dueling.
great.
It's so great.
Man.
And you know they had so much fun doing that
Like,
scene.
yeah.
Um, they had to have had, because they had such fun doing those things before, and
Mhm.
to get to come back 20 years later and do it
Yeah.
again.
Like they both had like a reputation for destroying numerous takes with their lightsaber sound effects, during shooting. Like, you can't do that. You can't, you can't shoom, like
But no, but they were both very, I mean, they did so much of the choreography with the lightsabers themselves in the prequels,
Mhm.
that this is something that they really were into.
And speaking of it coming back, like, it's like you get the real feeling that they like got out there and it's like, oh, here it is. Like, all
Yeah.
that stuff that you spent hundreds of hours drilling, it's like all of a sudden, I mean, the choreography was so meticulous. Because like I've heard people mention, like, it's a really interesting parallel between the fighting style you see in episode 1 and episode 2. It's like it's a halfway point between the
They've
fight.
done a really good job of showing how Obi-Wan's fighting styles have progressed,
Mhm. And
and how he's really become a much more defensive fighter.
yes.
The only time after, I'm sure we're going to see an Obi-Wan a little more on the offensive here in this final episode.
Mhm.
But the only, we do have a case of Obi-Wan being a little bit more of the offensive fighter when his last fight with Maul,
Mhm.
where he takes a little more aggressive stance. But that's a whole different thing.
Maul's his own thing.
Well, there's a whole bunch of fights that play out in both of their heads
Mhm.
prior to that strike.
Yeah.
Um, where that was kind of the culmination, and we didn't have to have a huge duel. It's this culmination of all these other duels that the two have had
Over the years,
over
yeah.
the years, and so it was kind of like, ultimately, Obi-Wan has bested him again and again and again, and in that scene's brilliant. I'm going way off topic again, but that scene's brilliant for a number of reasons, in the way that he plays with Maul's head, with luring him to strike the way he does.
Yeah.
Um,
I think this is another example of a really well-crafted fight scene that isn't just about, like, the choreography is awesome. It
Right.
looks cool. It's got a really important story to tell.
Right.
And I think the fact that they kind of intersperse it through the episode.
They did, and well, they were, because the whole episode, Obi-Wan and Anakin, this is where we've still got other players involved here, but it's really become about these two now,
Mhm.
and they are playing this cat and mouse game that we see played out in that duel.
And they know each other. And you see a lot of, this, you see this micro level, you see this fight where there are no stakes. And then you see this macro picture of this battle they're having, and they know each other. And I think that's the most important thing that this fight emphasizes, is that they know the kinds of decisions that the other one is going to make. He
Yeah.
says, like, well, why do you think Vader's going to come in here? He's like, because he hasn't got the patience to wait. He knows, he understands. And of course, the other side of that is Vader knows Obi-Wan.
Yeah. So here's something I really want to talk about this episode. We go through all the stuff. Obi-Wan surrenders, turns himself in, and he's being guarded apparently by some incompetent stormtroopers who he does something to, and
Something
runs
disagreeable.
off. So to basically back them off long enough for him to escape, and for the ship to escape. But he talks Riva into trying to take Vader down now because he will be so distracted. I think this is a little bit of an odd character choice for Obi-Wan. To now, granted, his sole purpose right now is protecting that child.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's the driving factor. I think you can say that in protecting these other people, especially now that Tal is gone, he feels like he has to get them off the planet. But he really sells Reva a bill of goods. Like, he straight up sends her to her death.
I mean, it could have worked.
Yeah, and maybe
I mean, like, he hasn't actually crossed blades with Vader since he almost died. Like, he knows who he is, he knows how he thinks, but he doesn't know what his physical limitations are at this point.
right.
So, like, it's a calculated risk, but she's dangerous.
She is.
Like, if she dies, it's no loss.
Well, she is dangerous, and I think that's why Vader allows her to live.
Yeah.
Couple of reasons. One, we can say whatever, whatever, however you feel about the people surviving a lightsaber wound. I get it. Granted, it is a weapon that cauterizes the wound. We've seen a lot of people lose limbs that you would normally bleed out almost instantly from.
Mm-hmm.
And be just fine. So I suppose it always will depend on where you're stabbed with it.
Yeah.
And I think that Vader maims her, but doesn't kill her intentionally because he knows she's dangerous, but not to him. She's no danger to him.
And I think that.
But the other thing is that to kill her would be a mercy, and Vader doesn't do mercy.
Right. But I think, sending her after Vader, it could work. Like, he's not lying. He's always the master, though, of that certain point of view.
Right.
I mean, the thing about Obi-Wan is he's a big picture kind of guy.
Mm-hmm.
Owen says, you don't care about that kid. You care about the universe, basically. He's not wrong.
No, he's not.
He's not wrong. The thing is, he made the decision a long time ago to choose that child over the fate of the world because he thought that child was going to solve the fate of the world. Well, it turned out it was a bad call. And so now he makes big picture decisions.
Right.
Like, and he convinces himself that they're the right thing to do. Like, that's his go-to move. So I feel like, I mean, if she pulls it off, great. He's not lying to her. It could work, especially with given the information he has. Like, he knows Anakin should have died, and he knows that if he, that he's just a shell of a man. He's got to be, because he knows the state he was left in.
Right.
But also, if it doesn't work, then this little conflict they're going to have is a distraction.
Mm-hmm.
If nothing else, she's a really good distraction. And basically, he's setting Vader and Reva up to distract each other from him for just long enough for him to get that child back where she belongs. Because ultimately...
Well, the other problem there was that, for Reva, and it's what Vader tells her, when he says, you thought I didn't see. And he's not talking about, you thought I didn't see that you were about to stab me in the back. Right. It's, you didn't think that I saw that your whole purpose in life was to kill me. Mm-hmm. Like, the only reason you're here is because you want to kill me. Like, so he's toyed with her. He has really toyed with her. Even when he makes her Grand Inquisitor, mm-hmm. It's all just to give her what she wants because he's using her as a tool.
Yeah. And I mean, she's kind of a tragic character because honestly, we just see her,
Right. She is a tragic character, which is why I feel kind of funny about Obi-Wan just being like, yeah, sure. Use me as a distraction, strike him down. Like, You know,
Like I
there's
said,
not a moment where he tries to call her back to the light.
no.
Now,
But does he?
granted, he thinks Vader's gone too. He
And
thinks
that's
his best friend in the world is lost.
like he walks off of that ship. He walks off Padme's ship to kill Anakin Skywalker because he's gone. So he's really willing to just for people to just, just write him off.
Yeah.
And he has no reason not to.
And I guess that's in an otherwise flawless character. I guess that's Obi-Wan's big flaw.
Yeah.
Because he's almost too good of a Jedi sometimes. Like, he
Mm-hmm.
is the quintessential Jedi. Anakin may be the main character, but Obi-Wan is everything a Jedi is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm. Including kind of unforgiving. And the thing is, as far as he's concerned, he saw what the Inquisitors did on Tatooine, just on Tatooine.
Right.
Like, he knows what they've been doing. He knows what she's capable of. He sees the kind of person she is. He doesn't want that person going back after Luke.
Right.
And he's not above using people.
No.
I mean, he we see in Clone Wars, we see him go this long period of time faking his own death to everybody, including Anakin, because he's a big picture guy. Yeah. He's pragmatic.
Right. And like I said, the only thing that really matters to him right now is getting Leia home. Mm-hmm. Now, I think we're fixing to go back to Tatooine because I think he's just figured out what's happening. So that's going to be interesting to see how that plays out.
But yeah, I feel like it does burnish his luster a little bit, right. But it's also a very in keeping with his character kind of decision, I think.
I think so. But it's kind of like you have this. It's like
that's a little icky.
Yeah.
Like I said, it could have worked if it had. Either way, you wind up with one of them is gone.
So my favorite thing about this episode is hands down Vader. Vader is, he's only there, and I like that he doesn't, I hope he shows up for a lot in this last episode. Mm-hmm. But like, they've used Vader, but they haven't overused Vader. Mm-hmm. But Vader is terrifying. I showed the kids were asking how the first Jedi Fallen Order game ends because they've been watching me play, but haven't been able to keep up with the whole story as I've played. Mm-hmm. So they were asking how it ends. And so I just showed them the cutscene from the end, and they were both just sitting there going, that's terrifying. Like when Vader comes out. And that's one thing, whatever you think about what Disney has done with Star Wars overall, Disney's Darth Vader is terrifying.
And that was the argument that people made when they went back and made the prequels. Are like, he was scary. Now you made him all like human.
Yeah, but Darth Vader's still very scary.
And I think that I think that that's part of the reason they've made such a point. Like, oh no. Like we saw that he used to be a good person. And now he's straight up the worst.
Right. And we in this one in episode 4, we got him. They've used the shaky cam in a few places in this series where I thought it was unnecessary, but I love that shaky cam usage when Vader's storming into the into that hangar, and grabs Reva. Like pure horror. Mm-hmm. And in this one, like in Jedi Fallen Order, when Vader finally shows up, like nobody's a match. He's just toying with everybody.
Absolutely.
And so we do the same thing here, and I really was glad they did that.
He toys with everybody except Obi-Wan. He ain't playing with Obi-Wan.
Right. But these Inquisitors, they're no match for Vader. They're no match for Vader or Obi-Wan, and we even see, like, when we go back to Rebels, we see Ahsoka and Maul wipe the floor with Inquisitors.
Groups of them.
Right. So I love seeing him just toy with her.
Mhm.
Like, he didn't even pull the lightsaber out. Like, he toys with her, just steps out of the way, pushes her back, finally takes her saber, snaps it in half, and throws half of it on the ground for her to pick up, and makes her try to fight him.
Mhm.
Um, and then we get to see this thing with him, pulling that first ship, the decoy ship, out of the sky as it tries to leave the hangar.
Yeah.
And Vader is just scary. And that's great. That's awesome. That's like, if we're going to use Vader, that's
Mhm.
what he needs to be.
Yeah. Got that Jedi Fallen Order moment where he pulls.
Yeah. So,
Not Fallen Order.
the
one with Star Killer.
Force Unleashed.
That one. Yeah.
Yeah. Force Unleashed, and it's why Sam Witwer is always like, it shouldn't be made into a movie. I'm like, it should be made into a movie. You just have to tone it down a little bit. I want, I'm not going to lie, I want this to end with the reveal of a secret apprentice. Hopefully, Starkiller.
I'd love to see Sam Witwer in live action Star Wars.
I mean, even at this point, if you cast somebody younger as the secret apprentice, and in the role, I mean, granted, that game's been out a long time now.
Yeah.
Not
he
that
still looks
could,
exactly the same as he did.
he did. He could still do it.
Like, exactly the same.
But yeah, like, that's something I really want to see here, is that, he's got the Emperor on one side who who never really trusts.
Mm-mm.
And he's got, on the other side, he's got these Inquisitors that would all like to take his spot.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes perfect sense in this world that they're building for him to take an apprentice.
Mm-hmm.
And I really thought for a little while that Riva was actually his secret apprentice. For the first few episodes.
Yeah, that would have tracked.
No, and because I kind of thought, because the other Inquisitors, like, you don't belong here, they don't really accept her, they don't like her, and it would have made a lot of sense for them to have done that. But I'm glad that they left the door open to do that, and that they've set up a world where a secret apprentice makes a lot of sense, because he needs somebody on his side.
Yeah.
But is there anything else that you really liked about this episode, or didn't, or anything that you think is going to happen in this finale?
I mean, we finally got to see Vader and Obi-Wan really throw down, right? But it can't be on Tatooine. Like, I think if Vader goes back to Tatooine, I feel like that kind of creates some believability issues with, like, the kid named Skywalker hiding out on Tatooine. Like, really?
So he
goes back to Tatooine and he never, like.
I think the first thing we're going to deal with in this episode, we already mentioned hyperdrive's not functioning on this ship and they're following us. Hopefully it's not some slow chase where somebody has to go off to a casino planet to find somebody to help that doesn't help, or
then we can have a race with the animals,
race some space horses.
Yeah, race some space horses and get preached at a little bit. I really did enjoy that movie, but it just had issues.
It has a lot of issues, but they're doing this. He's going to have to face off with Vader before he ever gets to go back to Tatooine.
Yeah, I think so.
He's got to face off with Vader now, and then they're going to have to go. So he's going to deal with Vader first, and then he's going to have to go deal with Riva.
Yeah.
We're going to end in some sort of conflict with Riva. I kind of expect something. I expect her to die.
And the thing is, if she's no competition for Vader, she's no competition for everyone either.
Right.
Like, because it's clear Obi-Wan and Anakin are very well matched. But if anybody's going to win that fight, we haven't seen Obi-Wan lose
No, I
to
mean
Anakin yet.
we exist in a world, in this Star Wars world post Episode 3, where you have some surviving Jedi in the galaxy, but then you also have these sort of undertrained
Mm-hmm.
wannabe Sith
Mm-hmm.
that just aren't a match for a real Jedi or a real Sith Lord.
No. And I think like if Reva really comes up against Obi-Wan, it's a real short story.
Yeah.
And I think the only reason that it doesn't end instantly is because he feels bad enough for her that he's going to try just a little bit to be like, come on, don't you want to do the right? Don't you want to give up?
Yeah. So
But it
I'm
doesn't
real
go her
curious
way.
to see how this plays out, but I don't think I really have a lot else to mention. I really liked the episode.
Mhm.
There's not just a ton. It's a really nice, neat story from start to finish with a major arc that mirrors the fight that
Mhm.
we get pieces of
Yeah.
throughout the episode. Where
You get to see Tala and her thermal detonator,
yeah,
which I feel was another really Star Wars moment.
that was a very Star Wars moment.
It's like that moment of self-sacrifice and redemption, because like she's done terrible things. And this is her, and she'll do anything to make it better.
I mean, self-sacrifice, sacrificing for others is a running theme throughout all of Star Wars,
Mm-hmm.
starting with Ben Kenobi in 1977. So,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm that's a thing we've seen happen a lot. I'm really excited for this finale. I I know that there's some of you out there that just haven't liked this show, but I don't see the
I'm not one
major
of them.
I don't see the major continuity errors
Mm-mm.
that I'm seeing claimed are in this show.
No, and honestly, I feel like there are like little like continuity with the 2 minutes that came before it issues, but as far as like big picture
Yeah,
continuity,
there are a
I
few
feel like
things.
it's been they have done a masterful job of making the big picture, making this story fit into, because the thing is, we know where it starts, we know where it ends. We know that it ends with Leia on Alderaan, Luke in Owen and Beru's house, and Ben in his little shanty on Tatooine. Like, we know where the story winds up. And so to tell a compelling story when you know how it starts and you know how it ends,
It's always the
that's
trouble of telling a story in the middle.
Mhm. And I think they've done a really good job of making it work.
No, I think they've done a
Telling
really
a
good job.
compelling, like I said, a compelling story when you know how it starts and you know how it ends, that's a tall order.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm enjoying it. We want to know what you thought about it. Let us know in the comments below if you're loving it or not liking it, what you loved or what you didn't, or what things that we should come back and talk about that we might have missed. Because as I've said before, it is always really hard to come back in and cover more than one episode of a show and keep it. Typically, we like to keep these under an hour, but we missed.
We did just a little bit. I mean, if you think of it as 2 episodes, then they're both under an hour. They're just all at one time.
That's true. Anything else before we wrap up?
I don't think so. I'm really excited for the finale.
Yeah,
I'm excited to see where they go, and I'm excited to see if Ewan McGregor was toying with us or if there will be a season 2.
Yeah, but stay tuned because Coruscant Radio Underground is back on a regular schedule. I think there will be episodes out pretty much every week going forward.
And there's
Maybe
Star
even
Wars stuff coming back out.
multiple episodes a week. I've got
Yes.
several sitting here, several ideas that we've got to finish fleshing out. We are in the middle of planning a Muppets, or I guess even more specifically, a Jim Henson
Mhm.
Episode or series on the science fictionary, but that's going to bleed over in a little bit of in-house crossover where we're going to talk about the creature shop in Star Wars.
Yes. And we can't forget that, like, wasn't it an Muppets episode where Mark Hamill wore the spangly
Oh yeah, we
suit?
will definitely talk about Mark Hamill on the Muppets, Gurgling Gershwin.
Yes, for sure. It's important.
Yep.
The important things in life.
So yeah, stay tuned for all of that and a whole lot more coming. So
Absolutely.
until next time, Marisha, where can people find you?
You can find me on Instagram at princesses_and_padawans. And I'm P Padawans on Twitter.
Okay. And you can find me running the Twitter account for this show at what? You can find me running the Twitter account for this show at crew_podcast. That's CRU_podcast. You can drop us a line at CoruscantRadioUnderground@gmail.com. And as always, reviews on anywhere you listen to a podcast, any reviews you leave are always very helpful, both in helping other people find our show and helping us know what we did that you liked and what we might not have done that you would like for us to do, or maybe even things that we did that you just absolutely hated.
Because we're the worst.
We're absolutely the worst. Palpatine's the worst. We're like just above Palpatine.
Or below, depending on how
you're
going.
Right. Depending on how you sorted your chart.
Is the worst at the bottom or is the worst at the top?
I don't know. We'll let the people reviewing the show tell us. All right, guys. But it's been great. Let us know what you thought in the comments. And until next time, may the force be with you.
This podcast is part of the Red 5 Network. For more Red 5 Network podcasts, visit red5network.com.